Korean Air Flight 801 was a regularly scheduled flight from Seoul to Guam. The captain of the flight was Park Yong-chul, who was 42 years old, with total 8,932 hours of flying experience. The co-pilot was Song-ho, who was 40 years old with 4,066 hours of flying experience. And the flight engineer was Nam-suk-ho, who was 57 years old with 13,065 hours of flying experience, including 11,088 hours as flight engineer. The aircraft took off at 9:53 for the destination Guam with 254 people on board. After around 3 hours 10 minutes, the aircraft was leveled at 41,000 feet and was about 240 nautical miles northwest of the Nemij VOR. At about 1:05, ATC told Flight 801 to expect to land on runway 6L, and the first officer acknowledged the transmission. At about 1:10, ATC instructed Flight 801 to descend at your discretion and maintain 2,600 feet. The captain was flying the aircraft. When they arrived to the Guam area, the first officer made initial contact with Guam Radar Approach Control controller. Then the captain started briefing the first officer and the flight engineer about the approach and landing at Guam. I will give you a short briefing. ILS is 1103. Nemij VOR is 1153. Since the visibility is 6, when we are in the visual approach, as I said before, set the VOR on number 2 and maintain the VOR for the top of descent. I will add 3 miles from the VOR and start descent when we are about 155 miles out. I will add some more speed above the target speed. Well, everything else is alright. In the case of go around, since it is visual flight rules, while staying visual and turning to the right, request the radar vector. If not, we have to go to flag. Since the localizer glide slope is out, minimum descent altitude is 560 feet and height above touchdown is 304 feet. About 1:22, ATC informed the flight crew that the automatic terminal information service uniform was current and that the altimeter setting was 29.86 inches of mercury. But his response did not acknowledge the altimeter setting. Then the controller approved the request to deviate 10 mile left of track due to weather. The controller instructed the flight crew to fly heading 120 degrees After this transmission, the flight crew performed the approach checklist and verified the radio frequency for ILS to runway 6L. At about 1:38, the controller instructed Flight 801 to turn left heading 090 and join localizer. At that time, Flight 801 was descending through 2,800 feet and the flaps were extended to 10 degrees with the landing gear up. At about 1:39, the controller informed the crew that they were cleared for ILS runway 6 left approach, and he mentioned that the glide slope is unusable. The first officer's response did not acknowledge that the glide slope was unusable. Now the aircraft began to descend from an altitude of 2,640 feet at a point approximately 9 nautical miles from the runway 6L threshold, and they were 5.7 nautical miles from the Nimitz VOR. The airplane was descending through 2,400 feet. When the airplane was about 8 nautical miles from the runway 6L threshold, then controller instructed Flight 801 to contact Agana Control Tower. The first officer acknowledged the frequency change.
2,000.
The airplane was descending below 2,000 feet at a point 6.8 nautical miles from the runway threshold and 3.5 nautical miles from the Nimitz VOR. The Agana Tower controller cleared Flight 801 to land on runway 6L, and the aircraft was descending through 1,800 feet. They started approach with 30 degrees of flaps. The captain called for the landing checklist, and flight engineer began reading the landing checklist. As the airplane descended through 1,400 feet, ground proximity warning system alarm began to sound and radio altitude call out.
Terrain. 1,000.
But the first officer and flight engineer did not respond to this question. Now the aircraft was descending through 1,100 feet and was about 4.6 nautical miles from the runway 6L threshold and approximately 1.3 nautical miles from Nimitz VOR. The aircraft was descending through 840 feet and the flight crew was performing the landing checklist.
Minimums.
Sink rate.
Pull up. Terrain. 200.
The aircraft descended through approximately 680 feet. Then the control column position began to increase towards nose of direction at the rate of about 1 degree per second. the airplane impacted hilly terrain at Nimage Hill.
100. 50, 40, 30, 20.
As NTSB, the contributing factor was the minimum safe altitude warning system. The crew had been using the outdated flight map. Flight 801 crashed near the Nimage VOR, which is situated on Nimage Hill at a height of 680 feet when it descended below the minimum safe altitude of 1,440 feet during its landing approach. The report also identified that the captain may have mistakenly believed that airplane was closer to the airport than it was, and that there may have been confusion about the location of the distance measuring equipment in relation to the airport. This much for today. If you are watching until now, then please support us by liking the video and subscribing the channel. Thank you for watching.